Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Victoria Castillo, President and CEO of the National Hispanic Media Coalition, and welcome to NHMC's Building Community. Today's episode is on science fiction and fantasy genres, which have allowed audiences around the world the opportunity to dream. Dream of a world hundreds of years in the future, a world full of magic and wonder, or dream of what other planets and worlds could look like. Yet for decades, Latino audiences globally have watched the big and small screens, witnessing vast worlds full of diversity in creatures, animals, and even magical beings, without seeing diversity in the human beings that play those roles. But times are changing, and more actors of color are sharing in the sci-fi and fantasy dream. From Lord of the Rings of Power, to Alien, Romulus, Latino actors fight everything from aliens to orcs. We can now see ourselves in the people traveling to different galaxies or dwelling in the magical worlds, showing that we too can share in the universal dream that is the promise of sci-fi and fantasy. I really would love to thank our panelists for this incredible work that they're doing in this space, working with NHMC to showcase the diverse voices that are truly redefining the genre. A special thank you to our panel moderator, the awards editor, TV and film at IndieWire, Marcus Jones.
But yeah, I guess to sort of take the ball from Brenda, now that we all know each other, jumping into this being a sci-fi fantasy panel, I'd love to go around with each of you and just hear sort of a sci-fi fantasy project people may know you from, and also just a general sci-fi fantasy project you love, whether it's a film, TV show, etc. And so I guess let's start with Summer.
I guess the one that people would most know me from is The Magicians. And I love the genre. I've always been like a sci-fi geek anyway. So I would say Firefly is like my favorite like sci-fi genre show. Yeah. One of many.
Exactly. And how about you, Aimee?
I would say most people probably know me from Lucifer as Ella Lopez. And my favorite, I have a couple. One is very old school, Twilight Zone. I think it's timeless. And X-Files, one of my favorites. But Buffy has a very close place in my heart. I've seen it no less than 7 times, all the way. So, Buffy for life.
Same.
I love it. Yeah. How about Lindsay, you?
Most people probably know me from a show called The 100. I played Raven Reyes for 7 years, which was great. And one of my favorite movies of all time is The Matrix. Like Matrix 1. You know, I'm not the biggest, I have some notes on the following one. But Matrix 1 is like one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time.
And then Eman, how about you?
Some people will know me from the spin-off show for Star Wars called Ahsoka. I play the Ezra. I play the Jedi Ezra Bridger. And then one of my favorites, it's not like a show, but this is what came to mind. When I was a kid, Cartoon Network had a time of day where they played something called Toonami. And Toonami had a host, and that host, would walk us through. And then there was like a takeover. It was like its own little baby.
I think his name was Tom, right?
Tom, dude. Tom had a big belly, and then someone else took him over. So I'd watch like all my favorite shows because he was the host of Toonami.
Yeah.
But that feels like my first intro to sci-fi as a kid. And so I wish to the world that Tom is in is what I want to say.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we've kind of gotten talking about sort of the projects we loved, the projects you all were a part of, I mean, it's a rare opportunity to enter these kind of sci-fi fantasy worlds, even rarer when it comes to being a Latino actor. We kind of wanted to go around and know what your favorite parts of playing those characters were, or even just entering into those worlds. I guess we can go around opposite. Eman, start with you.
Oh, cool. What it was like to play Ezra I feel like if someone asked, I didn't really know Star Wars before I did the role. Like it just didn't reach me in Laredo when I was a kid. So I didn't know much about it. And like, I don't know, I just started watching some of it, but didn't want to like overwhelm myself and watch it all too much. But now that I've seen it all after shooting, I realized that if someone were to ask someone off the street and go, hey, do you know anything about Star Wars? Like, no. Okay, do you want to play a character who does pretty much all the quintessential Star Wars things? And you're like, wait a minute, Star Wars, like this crazy franchise with lightsabers and jets or fighter pilots and this and that and the other. Like, yeah, your character does a little bit of everything. Everybody would say yes. That's like a VR experience. You know, it's like a simulated, like I living in Star Wars universe. And that's how it feels to play Ezra. Like, it's so crazy. They're like, you're going to do this now. I'm like, I get to do that too. That's awesome. I saw that in the movies. So that's how it's been. And then the Star Wars part of it, like the Force and the ideology, the George Lucas stuff, that's all surprisingly very aligned with like spirituality that I already possess. So I'm like, oh, that's so cool. He's teaching it through Star Wars. I love that. So it's like aligned and simultaneously like this hilarious VR feeling experience of getting to experience everything Star Wars.
This is a tough one because I played her for 7 years. So, you know, one of the best things about our show too was the lore of the 100 was so rich. Every season we really tried to do something else and something new. And so there was just so many worlds and characters and like storylines and everything. So it was really cool to get to kind of approach each season almost like its own new entity, you know, like that was really cool how they kept making it evolved. But another thing that most people don't know is when I auditioned for Raven, they did not specify her ethnicity. It was open-ended. She didn't have a last name. It wasn't important about her background. It was just like, this is this girl. And I thought that was always so interesting because I really liked how the writers wanted the actor to inform the character and inform how she looked and where she was from. And also this idea that in the future, race isn't everything, isn't the first thing we think about or the first thing we see when we see someone, really see someone's character. And it was just this really hopeful ideal that's one of the big things I love about sci-fi is it kind of let us talk about social constructs in an approachable way that now in the future we're not bound by the limitations we face right now as a society. So that was always one of my big favorite aspects of her. I don't think I even had a last name until the middle of season 2, which I thought was great.
Yeah, for me, it was really the impression that Ella Lopez made as a Latina scientist in STEM. So I didn't have superpowers or the ability to fly or any extraordinary gifts like everyone else on my show. They could fly, they could go down and up from heaven to hell. They, were super cool. And I was definitely not the cool kid on the show, but when I would go to these Comic-Cons all over the world, from Brazil to Bahrain, Australia, New Zealand, London, Mexico, a lot of young women especially would say, oh, I'm majoring in biology because of Ella Lopez. And I would have science teachers come up and say, hey, just so you know, we play clips of Ella Lopez's scene from Lucifer because Ella Lopez makes science cool. So I thought it was really special to be in this sci-fi genre, supernatural playing field where a girl can't fly, but a girl can become a scientist. And, we were talking earlier about the dolls that they make and, they went around and collected little fans all over the world that if I'm having a bad day, to like open up a little note, and they're like, a positive attitude causes a chain of reaction of positive. So it was just so, I mean, I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, but it's oh God, it's been or like, this is Ella's shirt, every now and then I fall apart like a taco, and I was just so moved by the fact that every gender, every sexual orientation, every nationality, every religion just identified with this brown scientist who wanted to hug everyone all the time. And so I was really moved by just the influence that a brown woman in science could have on such a global level. So it's really that. It's the inspiration and influence, like you were saying earlier, representation does matter. And I didn't have that as a kid, so that really, bust open my heart.
I mean, what Aimee said blew me away, because I grew up in Bahrain, and if I had met you in Bahrain when I was young and I wanted to be an actor, I mean, I grew up there before we had a cinema. Seif Mall hadn't opened up. Now obviously it's globalization. It's much larger. Now there's cons. That blew me away, actually. I cannot believe that there's cons that actresses are coming to, and diverse actresses, because I didn't grow up with any of that there. It was so removed from America. It felt like it was this impossible dream. Something like that would have changed my life. So to see you get so moved by that, it's incredible. I can't believe that you like went to Bahrain and there was this con, and that little girls had the opportunity to meet you and talk to you, and somebody who's really out there doing the thing that is like the dream, right? It just shows how far the world's come from when I started wanting to be an actor. And I think I always wanted to in Bahrain, but there was no cons or opportunity. I mean, it was just like, you're out of your mind. You want to be an actor? You're nuts. And we didn't see a lot of representation then. I'm 36, and I was 15 when I moved to the US, and it was at the height of there was a lot of Islamophobia. There was, this was when there was a lot of that going on. And I was like, I want to be an actor, and just because of the region I was coming from, it was never really even asked, what my mom was, and that I had come every summer to California and identified mostly with my my mother's side of the family, which is Mexican. And so that wasn't even really, I was floored that I was invited to this panel, because I do identify as Mexican, and I haven't really been able to talk about that ever, because the timing of when I entered the industry and the region I came from, I think I sort of started playing characters of that background, which I'm so proud of and so grateful for. But I do really relate to this other whole part of me that I haven't been able to talk about publicly. I mean, obviously my friends know, or even really have the opportunity to play. But so it was nice to be invited, because it was like, well, yes, I am Mexican, and Margot was too, because I am, but I almost felt like I didn't have the permission or something, if that makes sense, in, overall in my career, to sort of play, the nuances of my background as well, if that makes any sense.
And that kind of relates to the next thing I wanted to ask, is that like we've said, it's sort of there hasn't been much Latino representation, but there are still some legendary portrayals throughout the years that kind of prove the point of like, we've always been here. Like, you may not have casted us yet, but we've been around, thinking of somewhere, as you said, Firefly or something like Battlestar Galactica. But I think now we're seeing more Latino representation generally, but also a broader swath of representation. It's not just one idea of being Latina through these sci-fi and fantasy projects, and even just throughout the medium. And so I wonder, what are your thoughts on seeing that more in things like Alien Romulus, all the way to Lord of the Rings of Power? Because I also think, Lindsey, that hits on a point that you had said about sort of these projects speaking to this idea of like in the future, everyone doesn't necessarily have to be the same, or if it's fantasy, not everyone has to be the same. In fact, like, that might make the story worse if it's promoting this idea that this world only accepts this one person. So yeah, I guess what are your feelings about the broader representation in the sci-fi fantasy space, but also sort of the different representation that we're seeing a little bit?
Well, I think it's great. I'm all for it. 10 out of 10 subscribe. I think it's really important also. I think, especially in America, we are such a melting pot of a country, and the Latino population is growing and growing in this country. And, we're one of the biggest box office attendees. So I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't have that many role models or that many actresses or people on TV or in my media that looked like me. So, and when I was first starting out, I remember just getting like very typecast auditions, like, you are the crazy girlfriend, you are the maid. Like, it was just really like slim pickings, very stereotypical for me. And I remember being a young actor and feeling very dejected in the sense of like, well, this isn't necessarily the kind of role I want to play. I don't like the idea of proliferating stereotypes. Like, to me, it just didn't spark me as an artist, for a lot of reasons. And so when Raven came along, and I very much share the same sentiment as Aimee, is Raven was a zero-G mechanical space engineer. So it was a genius. and it was awesome in the sense of like, yes, finally, let's have a character that's not only female, but also brilliant, and also is in a space where she's not being held back by her ethnicity, that she's being embraced for her talents and skills as a full-fledged human being. And so I felt unbounded in the sense of, I think, in those other roles or other projects, I would have felt more inhibited. And I think, we have to say, or not have to, but the more we say it, the more important I think it is that representation matters. And it's even on a subconscious level. If we're not seeing people who look like us portrayed in a positive way in media, then we as a people are going to take in the idea that we're not aspirational. We can't be in science-based jobs or more intellectual spaces. Like, we are limited. We only see ourselves in one area of life, and that's all we're limited to. So I, for one, was just so happy and proud to be part of a show that was willing to push the boundaries, look past that, and aim for something more. And also, by the way, it's not unreal. You know what I'm saying? Like, why, I'm ranting. Sorry.
Go on.
Why,
No,
you know what I'm saying? It's like, why do we proliferate stereotypes in media when like sci-fi and fantasy, but all genres of media, it is story, it is creativity, it is creation. We are creating worlds. So why not create or strive to create a better world? And so I really love seeing so much more Latino representation in film and TV and media now, because one, I think it better mirrors our own world, our own landscape, A, and two, I also think it enriches our stories. So again, it's like, why dampen the possibilities in our own stories and our own creation by limiting ourselves?
Yeah.
Off my soapbox.
If
No,
just
Very
piggyback off,
passionate by that.
Also, Lindsay, huge fan of Raven Reyes. Huge fan.
Oh, thank
Loved
you.
you in that.
Thank
And Summer, I am also being half Middle Eastern. I did not get a single Latino. I got one Latino audition in my 3 years of acting.
Right?
When I first got to LA.
Yeah.
One Latino. It's my first language. Queto was my first word. Like I grew up on the border with Mexico, saying "¿Qué onda, wey? No mames, cállate, bro." Like I was fully a Spanish-speaking, Spanish identifying human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you mentioned the time that you moved here, and it was, I mean, I grew up 9/11 era, right? Like that
Yeah.
affectation of my day-to-day.
Yeah.
So it was like there was one side that was villainized everywhere I saw it.
Yeah.
And then there was this side that I was already split between because I was Ecuadorian. So at home it was this kind of Spanish. And then I was around a bunch of Mexican people. So with them, it was their kind of Spanish. And it was like a unique mix. And then I'm like, I'm going to be an actor. And they're like, great. What languages do you speak? I'm like, Spanish and French. They're like, oh yeah. Can we write Arabic down? I'm like, I don't speak Arabic. And my dad doesn't either. It would be Farsi. They're like, oh, okay. Could you learn that? And it was, so I felt that very much. I feel you, Lindsay, and I'm sure Aimee, you went through the same thing. Those stereotypical like auxiliary characters. Like literally you're like, oh, this scene doesn't need this character to function, but you need someone of diverse background. So you're throwing them in, and the only thing you could think to give them as a line is something that is stereotypical to the reason you brought them into the scene. Like that was another thing. Like you go from reading plays and then you read a scene for something and you're like, that's bullshit, you know, like that's not real. Why am I even going for this non-real person? Like
people don't talk like that.
People don't say that. People don't say that. Like
I know.
It's so weird. But the subconscious thing is the thing I wanted to piggyback off of. I did a role where it was an A24 movie called The Inspection. And it's a group of us joining the Marines. And so the lead is joining the Marines, and he's a gay Black man. So he goes through his trials of them finding out he's gay during Don't Ask, Don't Tell era and dealing with that. My character is Muslim descent, and it's 9/11 era. So he goes through the trials of them treating him like he's the enemy. And there's this moment I'll never forget on both the Star Wars show and this movie. And I had a scene where we're all practicing our aim. We're all like prone with rifles at a shooting target. And one of the drill instructors gets triggered because he sees my prayer beads. He goes crazy, throws me in front of the target, and goes on this monologue saying, this is what the enemy looks like. Don't let his uniform fool you. Get used to pointing your gun at this face. And I know it's heavy, but it's in line with the movie. And it also was like, during 2005, like for sure this stuff was happening. And the director did have an experience, like he witnessed something like this, so it wasn't too far off. But I remember feeling like that very severely affected me. I realized like having all the guns, even though they're fake guns, pointed at me was like very destructive and reminding of like growing up in that era. And then the first scene I shoot for Star Wars, I'm wearing a stormtrooper outfit, which in the world of Star Wars, they're the bad guys. And I've got the helmet on, and I'm walking off a ship. And my pseudo mother, the commander of the rebellion, has her gun pointed at me, and everyone has their guns pointed at me. But then when I take off the helmet and they see me, all their guns go down because I represent the hero that saved Lothal, the planet. So even though I'm wearing the enemy's uniform this time, when they see my actual face, which includes my skin, which includes my beard and my hair, and my eyes and my nose, it includes everything that makes me who I am based on my races. They remember that, they realize that's the hero. And that's like the beauty of sci-fi and fantasy, like you were saying, Lindsay, where like subconsciously, they're not thinking brown man. They're just thinking Ezra, character, Ezra. But in the context of that moment, Ezra is a hero, like a literal saver of thousands, millions of lives. And it just plants this unique seed as when you're young, especially, that like, oh, it doesn't matter what you look like to be a hero or to be the good guy, you know? And it's so fascinating how deep that goes, and seeing that, like you said, Aimee, when you meet people at cons, it's like very, very special. And even being, when you all introduced yourself and you're telling me all the mixes of races you all are, I'm like, I've never been on a Zoom with this much. Like, I have never, ever been on a Zoom where I'm talking to this many people of this much, you know, this many different backgrounds, you know, and Latino being like one of the through lines of that. And I agree with you, Summer. I was also honored. Like, what? I would love to talk. I am so Latino. It's crazy. And you don't really, you know, you get what you look like.
Yes.
What you are for the beginning of your life and your career.
When you're introduced.
Yes, when you're trying to break that glass ceiling. There was this analogy I'd give to my manager, because my old like roommate, we moved together. He's half Vietnamese and French and all these cultures.
Wow.
But we got all the same auditions because it was like ethnic ambiguity. All of you go into one room and fight to death for the one role that is going to be written stereotypically still. It's not a great role. It's like an auxiliary role, but you all fight to the death, and we have these 5 people cast. And it was like this weird Coliseum energy of act. I was like, dude, this is messed up.
That's a great way of putting it, a Coliseum energy.
It was like that. I'd go into an audition room and I'd see every race ever. And I'm like, we're all going for Max? Yes, sir. I said, hell, how are we all going for Max? That's crazy. There's so many roles.
Well, it's funny, like when I was cast in The Magicians, I was completely shocked because, and another thing touching on what you said was, when I moved here, you know, I just thought everyone in Bahrain, it was like we dealt more in nationalities because I went to an international school.
Oh, cool.
So it was sort of like, well, what are you? Okay, well, my father's Saudi, my mother's American. Oh, I'm French, or I'm Canadian, or, you know, because there were so many nationalities at the Department of Defense school. And so when I got to America, I was just like, I'm Saudi and I'm American, like in auditions. And then I got a film playing somebody of an Arab background. And, you know, I am Saudi, I'm half Saudi. I got the best, but, you know, that's what I am. My father is, he was born there, you know. And just like, you know, we're American, but we're not like this one thing. And so then I started, as my career progressed, well, you're not actually Saudi, like your blood's not actually Saudi. And it was like, well, I don't know. Like, I have to actually like ask my dad, like, Dad, like, how did our entire family make it to Saudi? Like,
my casting director is asking.
Yes. Like, so I had to learn, like, there's Afghani in us and Pakistani and all these things. And it just shouldn't matter as much as it's mattered. Like, representation matters. But I have felt like at some points in my career, it's like, do you want me to like open up my veins and like, you know, because it's almost, I've been asked so much.
Yeah, they almost want you to like send your 23andMe results.
Yes.
They do. Oh, they do. My manager did that for a friend, the Vietnamese friend, and it got him a role because the 23andMe said he was enough percentage of a certain race. And we were like, dude, that's so crazy.
That's actually funny.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, so when I got cast in Magicians, I was like, oh, they already cast Sergeant. I'm not going to get it. You know, it's just, they can't have 2 South Asians, you know, or 2 brown people. You know, I'm out. So it's a test. I thought Sarah Gamble, our showrunner, who's amazing, who also, like you said, Lindsey, like they didn't give me a surname until way later. And then she also was like, what do you want your surname to be? And I was like, I don't know. Let's just say it doesn't matter and keep it what it was in the breakdown. And she's like, cool, your choice. And so I was like, what? I have a choice? Like, are you kidding me? And Arjun got to pick his surname, and it was just really cool. But I remember the test, like Sarah Gamble was really taking her time with me, giving me direction. I was like, oh, like somebody's like, maybe I might get it, but now Arjun's already been cast. Like, because it was a different world. I mean, this was like 2014, 15. I don't know how long I was cast. But I just thought, no way. And I got the call, and I just was like, what? Like, you're gonna put 2 brown people out of 6 series regulars in the same show. Like, awesome. But I never thought I'd see the day. And just after getting
Wow.
off The Magicians, it was like suddenly it was like you could audition again. Because when you're on a series, everybody knows you're not auditioning as much. And it was like just being flooded with roles that I never thought in a million years. And I don't know if any of you guys can relate, but I have kind of whiplash because I'm like, you kind of traumatized me my whole career by saying I was the stereotype. And now you're telling me I could be like the girl. Like, what? I need a minute to adjust. I'm sorry. Like, to wrap my head around the fact that I deserve, because I have imposter syndrome now. I'm like, I have to unpack this stuff in therapy because sometimes I get these roles and it's like, you could tell you didn't give it your all. And it's like, well, are they really gonna consider like number one being, not white? Like, and it's, yes, they are. Things have changed, but I've had trouble, and I don't know if anyone else has, adjusting to that change and being like, yes, it has changed now. You go for that role. You could very well get that role. It's been a bit of a whiplash because I was so young when I was indoctrinated with the you're not good enough. Like you said, Lindsey, like that dejected feeling of like, ooh, like, and I kind of felt like I was so young. I was like, something's wrong with me innately. And I'll just be honest. I tried to change my appearance. I tried to look, it's embarrassing, but I should, and I have to talk about these things because I went through it as a young person. I tried to physically change the way I looked. I dyed my hair blonde. It's sad. I did that.
It's not sad. It's
Not
what
sad.
it does. It's the conditioning you're given. It's real.
the conditioning. And now it's like, okay, but the
Exactly
world's
what we're
changed.
talking about, Summer. Like, it's that exactly the importance of why
Yes, exactly.
representation matters, and
Yeah.
the way you look naturally and in your background matters. It matters to be seen,
Yeah.
and be witnessed not only by others but also by yourself.
Mhm.
You seeing yourself, you witnessing yourself and accepting yourself and being like, yeah, you're the girl. You're gonna be
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
That,
Right.
that hits on something else that I wanted to talk to you all about, is that especially Aimee, like you right behind you, we're seeing sort of the support from fans that you all are getting, providing this representation, and even just on the basis of representing, but also people's general love for you all's characters. But as you said, there's still challenges behind the scenes within the industry. And so I think a more specific question with like when it comes to representation, how would you respond to a studio exec who says there just isn't an appetite for that kind of project out there, or there just aren't that many Latina writers or actors who are working in this space?
I really think that it starts with a story. So I actually went through the NHMC writing program, which really, in my opinion, launched my writing career, where I co-wrote the sequel to 47 Ronin for Netflix and really wanted to write strong female protagonists. And my writing partner and I thought, why can't women be samurai? So it was really fun to be able to create the space in this world and not be limited by the realization of, what is, but create what could be. So I've really doubled down on that with, we wrote Dungeons and Dragons and we wrote Glow, and we have Latinas on the cover of our comics. And, like everyone's been saying, people are very much affected by what they see. And I really believe in my heart that entertainment is one of our most global exports, no matter where you are in the world. My cousins don't have running water in Mexico, but they have a phone and they watch Netflix. And I just went to Brazil, and it's this developing nation that obviously people don't make a lot of money, but they know Lucifer, they know the 100, they know, Star Wars, they know the Magicians. And so I really felt like the best way that I personally could be of service is to create roles for everyone on this Zoom, because everyone's so talented. And and magical. And so for me, I really feel like things are changing. The first thing I would say is I would give them a copy of Day of the Dead Girl, which is a comic that AJ and I, it will be out in stores October 9th. And our leads are all Latinos. And it's basically, you know, X-Files meets Dexter with a Latina twist. And Scully is a 25-year-old brown, you know, coroner. So I really feel like, you know, being the generation that I am, obviously I had the Zoe Saldanas, but now we're seeing the Anna Taylor-Joys and the Jenna Ortegas. And I feel like there is so much talent that I would 100% give a studio executive a list of this talent that we have in our community, of this beautiful hodgepodge of cultures and languages. And how beautiful that, you know, Eman speaks 3 languages. That to me is a superpower. That's not a detriment. So for me, I would include that and say, okay, he's trilingual. How beautiful. So he can be an asset to this team, whether it's sci-fi or not. I think that, you know, we live in a world where sometimes I feel that our system is behind what is actually happening, and we're playing a lot of catch up. So because I really have the luxury of going to a different city, a different country every single week, I feel like I'm in the bus, like taking the bus, be like, what are you watching? What do you like? And I think there's such a disconnect sometimes between Hollywood and what really is. And like Lindsey was saying, we are 25% of moviegoers and stream viewers. That's a quarter. We are definitely not a quarter of leads in film and television. We are the fastest growing population. We are huge consumers of media. We love it. And so I remember actually recently going to a movie, and 75% of the audience was Latino, and I see these, you know, Mexican kids wearing Captain America, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna write for 8 hours. I'm gonna write. And I remember the Avengers, and everyone came in, and you know, you had Black Panther crew come on, and you had the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I was like, we want to save people too. You know, and I looked around, and 75% of the audience is watching, and we're making Avengers successful, and we're making Guardians successful. And it just broke my heart that we were still so underrepresented. And so I felt like I'm gonna do what, you know, NHMC gave me the skills to do, and I'm going to write for people, and I'm going to create jobs, and I'm going to create roles that didn't exist when I was a kid, because I've been there when, like you said, you're trying out for Max. In my case, it's Maxine. But, so I am very inspired, but you know, we still have a lot of work to do. We are moving in the right direction, but you know, we still have to roll up our sleeves and just keep creating stories.
Do you all have, does anyone else kind of have dream sort of sci-fi or fantasy projects that they would like love to pitch people? I mean, I so want to see the live action version of your comic, Aimee, but also I got to mark down October 9th to go to my shop and read it. But yeah, I mean, is anyone else finding, like, now that they've had this opportunity, their creative juices flowing within this sci-fi fantasy space for more?
Yeah, I wrote a whole like mini series. It's gone nowhere other than my agent. But it is sci-fi, and it's about a group of mostly women who meet at an intensive outpatient facility right before the pandemic and right before the global shutdown. And they're all there for very different reasons. And I didn't write it for everybody to be diverse. It just happens that the people I look around in the world, like Aimee said, it's a diverse world, and it's still so underrepresented. And it wasn't like I was like, I'm gonna specifically, all these leads are going to be of this background. It just happened that way. And then it became this supernatural thing as well, because I love the genre. Like, I love Buffy. That's what I read. I read Grady Hendrix, you know, How to Sell a Haunted House, the guy who did Horror Store, Southern Woman's Guide to Slaying a Vampire or something, you know, all these books. And so that's always been what I'm inspired by. And I wrote it. And I also found myself for the first time writing about the fact that I'm Mexican, and my background and my experiences as somebody who is Mexican, and then my grandmother's experiences and my mother's experiences. And then it emerged into something that really shines a light, not intentionally, but it did, on some of the medical prejudices. So it's really interesting to hear Lindsey and Aimee talk about women in sciences being portrayed, women in the sciences, in the medical professions being portrayed, because it did evolve into sort of an indictment of the injustices in our mental health system in America still for minorities, for Black and brown women and Asian women and men, and also in the medical system. You know, one of the characters I found went through this medical event that was not handled properly because, you know, the doctor made a lot of assumptions about her based on what she presented like. And it's still happening all the time, every day. You know, so for me, it's just like, I'm interested. I want to be a writer and I want to keep writing it, but I'm also really like angry and frustrated about where we're at as far as representation in the sciences and in medicine. And we need to see more and more women like Aimee and Lindsey have portrayed, because I would love to walk into a doctor's office and see a woman of color and not have to feel like, oh my God, I have to explain like my right to exist in this moment and why these symptoms should be taken seriously, you know, because like literally like in the past, like one time I had MRSA. It's a really dangerous bacteria. You can die of it. It's like, it moves very quickly. And I went to a clinic and I said, my ear hurts. It was double its size and it hurt. And I was 19 years old and I went with my Japanese boyfriend at the time. He was Japanese. He was from Brazil. He was half Japanese, half German and Brazilian. And she was more concerned that I was on contraceptives than my rapidly growing ear.
Yeah.
And by the time I got treatment, they were thinking about possible amputation of the ear to save it my brain. So you know, we were coming a far way, but we got so much more work to do at so many levels of in our community and in society. And I'm interested in continuing to explore that script that I'm writing and the medical side of it, you know, and why aren't we being represented more there as well? And we need more of that portrayed on screen, you know?
Oh, but
I went on a tangent.
But that is like a very real thing. And like you said, you've found a way, even though you're working within a genre, of like addressing real issues, which I think is a great part of the sci-fi fantasy space, where we're kind of glamored by these new worlds, but it's such a room to address real things to a wider audience. And so, I mean, as we're sort of coming towards the end, I like a thing that we always think about is like, what can we do to keep this momentum going? It sounds like you all are working on so many things, and I'd love for you to shout them out, but also just if you have any other thoughts on how we can make Latina representation in the sci-fi fantasy space kind of more the norm rather than an exception or outlier.
I feel like Amy's really leading this movement.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm really inspired by her accomplishments and what she already had a very successful acting career, was able to successfully transition into writing and then use her skills to change media. You know, I think that's a wonderful example of how we all can literally be the change, and also supporting one another. You know, I think as all artists, we are part of a certain community. And just like we saw the amazing success of Black Panther, I believe that the Latino community needs their Black Panther. It needs to come out for their Black Panther, come out for the Latino writers, the Latino actors, the Latino movie makers, and show Hollywood that we are not only, you know, just a people, but we're a force to be reckoned with when it comes to box office decisions and streaming numbers and profit, as well as artists and storytellers. You know, I think those go hand in hand. And also encouraging the next generation and all generations is, I really think with the arts, you can start at any age. that if you have a story to tell, you know, I love that you're writing a script, Summer. I think that's amazing. I don't think anyone should limit themselves when it comes to their creativity. And I think encouraging the arts, especially in more minority communities, is huge. That was what it was for me. I was encouraged by a Latino arts center in my high school, and that's what really changed the game for me.
I so appreciate that. And, you know, I think we can vote with our purchasing power. I mean, we are mainstream. So, you know, you look at the Bear, you look at the Emmy nominations, the headway that we made. We are smart business.
Mhm.
We will make your streamer, your company successful. So sometimes I feel like if people don't do it because it's the right thing to do, then, you know, we should continue supporting like Mad Max. I mean, you know, an Argentinian actress headlines that, or like Three Body Problem with, you know, Isa Gonzalez, and obviously Jenna Ortega with Wednesday and Beetlejuice. I think that, you know, Latinos make things successful, and we like things that are good. We like seeing ourselves represented, whether we're half, a quarter, whatever, you know, and people who aren't Latino love Latino culture and language. And look at the success of Coco, $800 million. It was a total surprise for Disney. So I think, you know, by continuing to make choices with our purchasing power, and by continuing to support each other, like Lindsey was saying, and Eman, like, you know, to me, sci-fi and genre is one of the most inclusive genres, because it translates. Sometimes comedy doesn't translate from this side of the world to that side, but action and genre is so fantastical that I think we continue doing what we're doing as actors. You know, we continue building a network. So my door is always open if any one of you have IP that you want to do, or, you know, and we start building this network of people that have done it before us. But I feel like instead of being gladiators, we just support each other and say, okay, NHMC, they're showing you how to write. That's very important, to give someone the resources and the skill set to create the change that they want to see. So I think you guys continuing to do these panels, when people watch this, they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm half this too. If he can do it, I can do it. If Summer can do it, I can do it. I think it's very important to continue supporting these platforms, because you feel less alone and you really feel supported by a community. So I love this. I would love all your emails at some point. Let's
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
build a little tribe, and you know, and kind of go backward, forward, like we just sneak attack Hollywood, and they're like, whoa, how is this?
Well, unite, you know?
Exactly.
I think the Latino community is too humble. Like everyone's too humble. Like no one's bragging about what they're doing and like how we can support them and that they're out there, you know? I think we all need to be like, hey, let's have our voices be heard a little bit more and encourage one another and support one another.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to wrap on. I know for one, feel so inspired talking to you all, and this may be the end of the panel, but I feel like we're going to see so much more from you guys. So once again, thank you guys. And